what we have done in the last class, like we're just getting to the review part. And one of the most important thing that we have discussed is about the MOS structure. Okay, so we just took the metal, and then the oxide, and then the semiconductor. And throughout the discussion, I guess we were using this p-type as our semiconductor layer, and then we were talking about 3 modes of operation for this kind of structure. One is the accumulation. Okay, so in the case of an accumulation, if at all, if I assume that this is my VG, the VG was said to have some sort of negative voltage, and okay, and later we spoke about the depletion. So in the depletion, the gate potential was between something like this. Okay, so anyhow, I'll talk about each of these things, and whatever I've written down here is not exactly right, but as of now, we'll just hold this concept as it is, and then we'll just move ahead. Okay, and later I'll just remodify these gate potentials and the depletion region layers and all those things. But as of now, we'll just hold this. And the third one we spoke about is the inversion region. Okay, and this is the region where when the gate potential is greater than the value of VT. And I hope that you are comfortable with all these 3 regions of operation, because the one that we are going to talk today is about the CV-Kera. And in order to talk about the CV-Kera, first of all, you have to be clear with these things. I hope you don't have any doubts related to this 3 regions of operation for the metal oxide semiconductor structure, or the MOS structure that I have here. Okay, so with that hope, let me just begin with the discussion of CV characteristics. But today, maybe some of you might appreciate, but I guess many of you might not appreciate what I'm going to discuss today. So you have to bear with me just for today. I'll just make as simple as possible, so that the entire discussion would help you to understand at least barely how the CV-Kera actually been drawn. Okay, so I'll just ask some pretty simple questions, and then I'll try to understand few things, if not the complete concept, because this is something related to fields. I know that, including me, I'm a bit afraid about field theory. I'm not that much good in it, but for this current discussion, it is better if we could able to understand very few things, and only the electrostatic principles, not the time varying field concepts and those things. Okay, so only the very basic things that we are going to discuss, and then we'll just try to wind up as early as possible. Okay, yeah. So the very first thing is that I just have a question. What happens to an electric field that is inside a metal? So this metal can be a pure, okay. Yeah, so basically the electric field inside a metal is basically equal to 0, just because of this weird reason. Okay, so if you take a metal, the metal is generally charge neutral. Okay, so when you try to deposit an extra charge on it, say for example, I have 2 positive charge that I'm trying to put it on the metal. What happens is that these positive charges would then repel each other. Okay, the fields will try to repel each other, and then these charges would then be only on the surface. You cannot have any charges inside the metal. Okay, so in short, what we have is this E, or the electric field, is basically 0 inside this particular metal. Okay, so let us hold this concept, and let us move on to the next one, where we will talk about let me just try to complete the other thing. So we know from potential equation, I guess everyone knows about this potential equation, where the electric field can be derived from a potential. So we have E that is equal to a gradient of a potential field. Sometimes it is written as gradient of V, or sometimes it is written as gradient of phi. So whichever notation you are comfortable, you can just use it. But I will use this phi notation, and whenever I want to talk about a potential difference, then I will talk as something like V. So say for example, I want to write a potential difference as V sub AB, then I would write it as something like this. Okay, so any notation is fine. I'm just going to follow this notation. Okay, so wherever I try to write it as V, then what you're trying to represent is a potential difference. But whenever I try to write it as phi, I'm talking about the potential at that particular point. That's it. Okay, yeah. So now, just because the electric field inside this particular metal is basically equal to 0, what does it actually mean for us? Okay, so this means that what are the potential that I have at point A will be exactly at point B as well, right? So only then the difference becomes equal to 0. Okay, so this can be written as something like phi of A minus the gradient in a one-dimensional quantity. So this is in terms of 3D, but when I take a one-dimensional space, then the same equation can be represented as something like minus dv by dx. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to assume that there is a metal or something, okay, with respect to x variable. Okay, so and in this is my A and this is my B, and whatever the potential that I have here, the same potential has to appear even at this. Say for example, I have 5 volt here, the same 5 volt would be available here, so that the potential difference between these 2 points would be equal to 0, and that is what we are mean by the electric field being equal to 0. Okay, so in a way, there is no potential drop across the metal. Okay. Let me just move on to the next one. Okay, probably that would be a better option, as I just don't want to get more deep into it. Let us talk about the electric field inside an oxide. Okay, so now what about the electric field inside an oxide? Can we have any electric field? I know that I'm asking a weird question. The answer is yes, as well as no. Okay, the reason becomes pretty simple. The point is that inside an oxide, we don't have any charges. Okay, so when I say that there is no charge exists inside the oxide, obviously we cannot come to the conclusion that the electric field can be equal to 0 as we did for our metal. Okay, an oxide is a kind of dielectric medium. So when I say dielectric medium, whenever I have some positive charge on one side of the oxide, I can have a negative charge on the other side of the oxide. May not be inside, but I can have the charges around them, okay, different charges. But when I say a metal can have the same type of charges around it, okay? So in this case, the electric field is basically completely equal to 0, okay? The electric field surrounding a metal is completely equal to 0 when I have the same similar charges, okay? Because these charges would then distribute through the surface, and due to which I'll have same type of charges around the metal. Okay, whereas in the case of an oxide, it depends on what type of charges that I have across the ends of the structure. Okay, so if I don't have any charges across the either side of my oxide, then the electric field is equal to 0. If I have a single positive and a single negative charge on either side, then the electric field is no more equal to 0. Okay, so but we will have some sort of constant. So rather than writing it as 0 and something, I could generalize this entire statement as the electric field is equal to constant. Am I right? Because depending on the type of charges that I have, there will be certain value, and that value includes even the value of 0. Okay, and due to which I could say that the electric field across the oxide will be a constant. Okay, now when I say the electric field is basically a constant, let us look for the potential profile. Now again from the theorem, which is basically the potential equation, okay, I know that the electric field can be written as d phi by dx, and that is equal to constants. Okay, so now what does it mean for us is that there exists some sort of difference in the potential profile. Okay, so let me just try to write it as something like point A and point B. Okay, I just want to measure the potential difference across that. Okay, so now in a way, this d phi can be written as the difference between two different points, right? Maybe I'll write it as d phi as something like the potential at A and the potential at some point B. Okay, and the dx can be written as A minus B. Okay, hope that you are at least familiar with these differentiation quantities, what it actually means. Okay, and I'm also hoping that you are much familiar than me. Okay, comparatively. Okay. Yeah. So when I have a constant electric field, the potential profile would then be something like this. Okay. As I move from one end to the point B, from A to point B, the potential difference actually steps down linearly. Okay. I'm just drawing only the graph. I'm not showing anything fancy here. So this could be taken directly from here. So you just want to measure the potential profile or the potential difference. What you can do is you can just go for an integration on this particular equation. This would be my phi of x quantity. Okay. So as I move this particular point A much closer to the point B, and what is happening is that the potential difference becomes smaller and smaller, and when both point A and point B are equal, then they become equal to 0. Okay, so when I have a constant electric field, the potential would be something like this. Okay, it's a linear function of distance. Clear? But in the case when I have an electric field that is equal to 0, how I can observe the potential graph of it between point A and point B? Can there be any answer for this? I've said if the electric field is equal to a constant, then you have a variable quantity. Yeah. So the voltage would be a kind of constant, right? Why? Because as I said before, if I have plus 5 volt, the same plus 5 volt would be available on the other side of my metal. Okay. So when I go along the distance, both point A and point B will have the same potential. If it is a 5 volt, it would be something like this. Okay. So this is my phi graph. A 5 volt would be having a constant line across both the sides. When I have an electric field, something like this. But when I have an electric field which is a constant, then you would have a kind of variable voltage across it. Okay, it's something like a kind of resistive kind of component. Okay. Yeah. So now let us go for the third type of structure, which is more important for our current discussion. Okay. I'm just going to take as an MOS structure rather than talking about each individual structures separately. I'm just going to combine metal, which we discussed as a first topic, and second one, the oxide. And the third one is the semiconductor. Okay, so because semiconductor alone cannot be used as a kind of circuit element, I have to combine them in order to create some working structures. Okay. And I'm going to assume the current discussion is basically on the depletion region. Okay. Now we know like what type of potential has to exist across the gate. Okay, so this would be my gate potential. Okay, and this gate is right now carries some sort of negative voltage. Okay, and this is a p-type, and as I said, when I have a negative voltage being attached to my gate, then it actually deposits some sort of negative charges. And as I said, because the electric field inside the metal has to be equal to 0, these negative charges that I'm trying to deposit through my negative potential would then settle around the surface of my metal. Okay, something like this. All of the free electrons that has come through this negative voltage appears only on the surface. Okay, it doesn't go inside the metal. Okay, and that is the proof of the first discussion. Clear? Now, when I have a negative charges on one side, obviously what happens is that you have to have charge neutrality across the structure that we have, and due to which it tries to ripple off. It tries to. Oh, sorry, it's not a depletion, right? So it tries to attract more of positive charges towards this, and we call this as a depletion of what type of region that I have drawn right now?
Accumulation.
Yeah, this is an accumulation. It is not a depletion, right? Yeah. Sorry for that. So I shouldn't have had a negative voltage, but rather it's a positive voltage. Okay, and this positive voltage, I'm just ensuring that this positive voltage is less than the value of VT, the threshold voltage of this particular structure. Okay, yeah, it's a positive quantity, and due to which I will have positive charges on the metal surface. Yeah. Now, in turn, what does it do for the p-type semiconductor? So these positive charges will try to ripple off the positive holes that exist in my p-type semiconductor. So while you strip off a hole from an already neutral element, it leaves something known as a negative ions, which we discussed in the last class, right? It leaves out some negative ions, and these ions are not free carriers. They are fixed, they are immobile, whereas these positive charges I have across the other side, like across the metal, is basically free carriers. They are free to move around. Clear? So now, because of this existence of immobile charges, it creates a kind of depth. We call that depth as a depletion layer. Okay. Now, this depletion layer actually keeps growing until I reach the value of Vg that is exactly equal to Vd. Okay, so say for example, I'm almost my gate potential is equal to VT. Okay, it's almost slightly lesser, but still it is quite closer to the value of VT. Now what has happened is it has deposited more number of positive charges on this side, and in turn it has rippled off all of my positive charges away from this interface, and it creates a quite a large depth into my depletion layer. Okay, so it has rippled all of the free carriers holes away from this particular interface, and that has widened up my depletion layer. Okay, and this is the end. Okay, and this width of depletion layer is fixed. The moment I cross the value of VG, which is kind of slightly higher than the value of VT, then what happens right now? The depletion layer width will stay constant after then. Okay, the only thing is that at this condition, when the value of VG is greater than VT, we would have pulled off some electrons into this interface. Okay, that appears right between the oxide and the depletion layer. Okay, so we have just tried to create a layer of a very thin layer of electrons, which are all due to the minority carriers. Okay, and this minority carriers has become more concentrated at this particular interface between the oxide and this depletion layer. Okay, hope that you're all familiar with this particular topics, I guess. Okay, so this is the one that would help us for the conduction of current between the source and the drain. These set of electrons that I have pulled when I have a voltage which is greater than VT. Okay, but when I look across the depletion layer width is held constant. Whatever the voltage that I have above the value of VT, it has been kept constant after that. Okay, so say for example, I'm trying to increase the value of VG to much larger voltage. Okay, much larger voltage. Okay, now what it does is that it tries to pull many electrons in this particular structure that is between the oxide and the depletion layer, but the width of the depletion layer still remains constant. Okay, this is something that you always have to remember. Okay, so the channel has become much wider, carrying many electrons here, but when I look across the depletion layer width, that remains constant after you cross the value of VG, which is greater than the value of VT. Okay, so this is something which is important. We'll just hold this concept throughout the entire discussion. Okay, so now I'm just worried about the depletion layer. So means I'm talking about a voltage of VG which is positive, but still it is less than the value of VT. So we don't have any negative charges at this particular interface. It's only the depletion layer that I have. Now under this condition, let us try to map our charge concentrations. Okay, so right now I'm just going to talk about what is known as charge profile. So, and I'm just going to the axis that I'm working is an x-axis, and I'm just going to mark this x-axis as a 0. Okay, where the interface is between the oxide and the semiconductor. Okay, and I have a thickness of oxide that I am marking it as minus TOX. Okay, and after that there is a metal. Okay, metal, oxide, semiconductor, and these are the distances that I have along the x-axis. Hope that it makes sense, because I have a negative value when I cross the value of 0. Okay, so this is a 0. So when I have x that is equal to 0, we are at the interface between the oxide and the semiconductor. When the x value is at minus TOX, we are at the interface between the metal and the oxide. Okay, so hope that this notation is clear to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I couldn't follow what you said would happen if it goes much higher than VT. Like, will the depletion layer be constant, or will it like taper?
No. The tapering will happen when we have drain to source potential. Okay, so that is, we are not talking about drain to source, because the drain and source layer I yet to have it. Okay, so it is something like I'm talking only about the metal oxide semiconductor. So maybe in 2D, I'm worried about only this structure. Still, I yet to have the source as well as drain. Okay, we are not talking about any of these structures yet. Okay, we are talking about MOS alone, stripping off these two layers away.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just clarify again. So what is happening is that as I increase the value of VG, which is greater than the value of VT, it just creates a pool of negative charges, but the depletion width will stay constant. Okay, so that is what I'm trying to say. And after that, below that, we have p types holes. Okay, so the majority carriers at this particular region is all holes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sir, but the concentration of electrons and ions will increase now. So that means depletion layer should also increase.
No. Once you cross the value of Vg that is greater than Vt, the depletion layer will not get affected. The thickness of this will not get affected. But when I have Vg that is equal to 0, you will have a different depletion layer. Say, for example, let us assume that I have Vt as 0.7 volt. So as I approach the value of Vt, so say, for example, when I have Vg that is equal to 0.2, there will be a different, the height of this depletion layer will increase. And when I have at 0.5, the height would be much higher. Okay. When the value of Vg is exactly at 0.75, the height of that would be much higher than the previous voltages that I had. But once I cross this Vt, the height remains constant. The height of the
Sir, does that mean that when Vg is equal to Vt, like all the minority carriers in the p-type, which are electrons, are like almost all the electrons will get accumulated in that top?
Of course, yeah. When you have Vg that is equal to Vt, the magnetic carriers would then get accumulated here. And as I increase the value of V on Vt, more of the magnetic carriers would get accumulated, and the width of the channel or the magnetic carriers will widen. Okay, not the depletion layer width. After this, once you cross this value of Vg beyond Vt, the depletion width is constant. Okay.
Okay, it remains constant because few of the electrons get jumped to the metal oxide layer, or how is it?
No. It is like it has enough field to attract the electrons through the. It's a kind of p-n junction concept. Okay, it's a kind of reverse bias conditions that we have, and through which it actually been attracted towards the electron, because we have a very high electric field just by depositing more of positive charges on the metal. Okay, and this high electric field will try to attract more of electron passing through our depletion layer, which is actually a kind of a dielectric medium. Okay, it actually pulls all the electrons through across this particular depletion layer, and it tries to accumulate more of electrons at this particular junction or across the blue layer. Okay, so once you cross the value thing, only the channel, or basically the magnetic carrier, okay, width increases. Okay, but this one will be held constant. So can you define Vt? Okay, so what do we mean by a threshold voltage? Is that it is the minimum voltage that is required across the gate to create a channel. So channel is basically built by making use of magnetic carriers. Okay, and that is what is known as the threshold voltage. So in short, the threshold voltage has two functionalities. The very first thing is it has to first create a depletion layer, as well as it has to create a minimum channel across this particular structure. Okay, so also it has to create some sort of channel, and this channel is basically built by making use of the magnetic carriers of the type of semiconductor that I'm using. Okay, and these magnetic carriers are free carriers. Okay, it is not like depletion layer where we had immobile ions. Okay, so in this case we had immobile ions. Okay, but when I look across the channel, these are all like free carriers. However, I had holes here in the p-type, which are all free carriers. The same similar way, I have negative charges which are free to move. These are the free carriers that helps us to move the charges from source to drain. Clear? And in short, the threshold voltage has to perform two functions. One is, first of all, to create a depletion layer, and then it has to create a minimum channel, which is created by pulling all the magnetic carriers towards the oxide semiconductor interface. So we will talk about more about the threshold voltage when we discuss about second order effects further. Okay, I hope I have answered your question. Shall I move further?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so now that we are not having a voltage which is greater than Vt, we are still having a voltage that is less than Vt, which means that we don't have any channel at all. So this part is not there if I have Vg that is less than Vt. Only thing that I have is just some sort of depletion layer, okay? And this depletion layer contains only the immobile ions in them, okay? So for this, I just want to write, first of all, the charge profile. Now, what it means by charge profile is that whenever I have a free carriers, okay, so again, this charge profile is with respect to x-axis, and I have 0, and I have this line which separates the oxide and the metal, okay? I'll just write it as OX to denote here. And then there is a metal, and then there is a semiconductor. Okay, so now in this, all of these positive charges that I have created just because of the voltage, which is a positive voltage, would then be represented by some sort of peaking, okay, because it is lying exactly on the surface, okay, on the surface between the oxide and the metal. So I'm just representing them with a kind of arrow, okay, of certain height. And whereas on the other hand, I have immobile carriers, and these immobile carriers actually occupy some space, okay, along the x-axis. And I'm representing those immobile carriers with some sort of rectangle, not as a kind of spike, okay? So this is the charge profile that I have for the MOS structure, which is in the depletion mode, okay? Now, just as a quick review, in case if I have a VG that is greater than VT, then the charge profile of this can be modified something like this, okay? So maybe I will just copy this structure. I don't want to ruin this particular picture. Just for a quick discussion, I just want to bring out how does the charge profile would get modified when I'm having a VG that is greater than VT. It would be just as quick, okay? So now that I have deposited more of positive charges, so which means that the magnitude of this positive charges would then be increased further, okay? And then obviously my depletion layer would have reached the maximum width, okay? And then I also would have attracted some negative charges which are free carriers. So these negative carriers, which are free carriers, will be exactly on the interface, okay? So the magnitude of this one and the magnitude of this one will combinedly have to reflect the charges that I have on the positive side, okay? Hope that you are clear with this voltage, because as I said, we have magnetic carriers which are free carriers. Along with it, we also have the depletion layer. So the magnitude of this free carriers, I'm just plotting it with some sort of spike here, okay? Which the combination of both these negative charges, okay, negative ions with the negative charges has to compensate the positive charges that I have across the metal, okay? Again, the rule is how much ever charges that I have on one side, the same equal and opposite amount of charges has to be available on the other side of your oxide, okay? So that's the reason why we will have this kind of profile when we are in the inversion region, okay? But for the current discussion, this region we will not consider, okay? So we'll just wind up this particular thing. If you have any doubt in this particular picture, you can just ask me.
Sir, can you please brief once again about this diagram? Like
this particular picture? Yes, I'll just do that, okay? So when I have a VG, a potential, as I increase the value of VG greater than the value of VT, what happens is that I'm trying to deposit more of positive charges, okay? So it means that the height of this, the magnitude plot of this one would then increase further, okay? I've just increased the height of this particular charge profile just because I have more positive voltage than the value of VT, which means that I've deposited more of positive charges on the metal oxide interface, okay? So due to which the height of this particular profile from the previous profile, it has got raised up, right? So now we know that whenever the value of VG that is greater than VT, it will have two things. One is the mobile carriers, which is nothing but the electrons, okay, which are free carriers. And also there is a yellow region, which is nothing but the depletion region. When I look across the depletion region, the type of charge that it holds is again a negative charge, but they are immobile. They are not like free carriers. They are immobile negative ions. Okay, so both are basically negative. So what I'm trying to say here is that whatever the positive quantity that I have has to be compensated by an equal amount of negative charges, okay? Either it is a free carrier or the immobile carriers, okay? So that has been compensated by this kind of profile, okay? So whenever I have a free carriers, then those carriers are represented by some sort of spike. Along with this, And if I cut this spike, the height of this spike is not same as that of the height of the spike of my positive charges. Okay, so the remaining part of the negative charges is being compensated by the depletion negatively charged ion. Okay, does it sounds better?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir, if the charge, because the width of the depletion region is constant, won't the charge also be constant in the depletion region?
Yes, yes, that charge would be held constant. Okay, say for example, I have some voltage VG. Let me use a different color. Okay, maybe the green one. So this voltage is much greater than the value of VT. So means I have deposited more of positive charges. Now this charge that is there in the depletion layer will not modify. But what would modify is that you are trying to put more of electrons, and those electrons are free carriers. So only the height of the spike will increase, but the width of the depletion ions that I have will never increase the moment I cross the value of VG, which is equal to VT. Or once I cross the value of VG that is equal to VT, the amount of charge that I have here is fixed. Okay, so this is fixed. Only thing is, any further increase in my metal would only modify the magnetic carriers between the oxide and the depletion layer. Okay, any further increase will only modify the electrons, free carriers. Okay, will not modify the ions in them, and that's the reason
So
why
any further increase results in the channel formation, sir?
of course, yeah. The width of this channel will become wider. Okay, the width will become variable. Okay, but the width of the yellow that I have marked here is always held constant. So the charge inside them is also constant. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So the yellow layer is the depletion region.
Yes.
And the blue one is the free carriers, minority carriers.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, I got it, sir.
Yeah. So now, anyhow, this entire discussion is just to bring some sort of familiarity with your concept that you have learned. Okay, but we are not going to address this inversion. Okay, I'll just remove this, and I just want to draw something. Okay, so so this is my charge profile that I have, and it has some sort of depth. Okay, so maybe the amount of charge that I have here can be written as something like rho naught, and I will not put all the expressions here. Okay, if you are interested later, we'll see for it. But I just want to bring out the other profiles. Okay, one is electric field profile, the other one is the potential profile. Okay, but before I start doing it, there is something that we have to think about: boundary conditions. Okay, now again, I will not go in depth. When I take an electric field, okay, the electric field across different boundaries, because why we are concerned about boundary conditions for something like an electronic device is that we generally know that these electronic devices are made of different materials. Okay, it is not the same material that I can use as a kind of structure. Even a metal oxide semiconductor are all made of 3 different materials, right? So we have to be concerned about the boundary conditions. Now, when I take an electric field, the electric field actually can be different from one layer to the other layer. Okay, it's again, you can just make use of one of the theorem which is known as Gauss law. Okay, so the Gauss law will help us to say that the electric field can be different from one layer to the other layer. So what it means is that I can have a different electric field here, different electric field here, and a different electric field here. Okay, but when I have a potential, okay, across any structure that I have created has to be continuous. You cannot have a discontinuous function. Okay, the potential has to be continuous across interface. Okay, any interface it can be between metal and oxide or between oxide and semiconductor. Okay, so these are the 2 things that I will use it in order to draw both the electric field profile as well as the potential profile of this MOA structure under depletion condition. Clear? And you don't ask me how this boundary conditions and all works, because purely it's based on your field theory. Okay, so if you want, I can just give a hint that this can be proved with a Gauss law, and this can be proved with just the potential equation that I was writing, right, which is the gradient of V. that is equal to the electric field. So based on those two principles, one can prove these two conditions across the boundaries. Yeah. So I'll not go much more in depth. I'll just hold myself. So now what we do is that let us try to draw the electric field profile. Again, I have those interfaces, 0, and the other one is at TOX. And what we have said in the first part of our discussion is that the electric field inside the metal has to be equal to 0. Okay, so it is actually equal to 0. But the electric field across the oxide need not to be equal to 0, and that it can be a constant one, right? So now under this condition, we know that there is a positive charge and there is also an equal amount of negative ions on the other side of the interface. So there exists some sort of field. Okay, I think the electric field would be just opposite to from negative to positive charges, it moves. Okay, so there will exist some sort of constant field. So the field of this can be returned as something like this. Okay, having some height along the y-axis. Clear? There is some constant value across them depending on the amount of charges that I have here, as well as on the other side of my oxide. Okay, but how about the electric field across this semiconductor? Now again, this semiconductor, it can be proved because I have a depletion layer, and since I said the electric field actually can have discontinuous function, it would be something like this. It becomes something like a linear function of the distance. Okay, I haven't proved it because it's all mathematics, and I've literally failed teaching all these things to your seniors, so I don't want to do the same mistake and doing the same thing. Okay, so in this case, what we have drawn is just the electric field profile of this MOS structure. Okay, now based on this and by applying the potential equation, one can quickly draw what is known as the potential profile. This is my electric profile. Now I just want to write the other profile, which is nothing but the potential profile. Now, as I said, since the electric field inside the metal is 0, means that whatever the potential I have on one side, the same potential has to be available on the other side. Okay, there is no potential drop across the metal. Okay, so due to which, assume that there is some potential like 5 volt or something. The same 5 volt is available till I reach the oxide metal interface. Clear? And then over here, so what happens here when there is a kind of constant electric field? We just drawn a graph, right? So that graph had showed that there is a linearly dependent voltage drop. Okay, obviously there is a voltage drop across the layer, and when I look carefully, they generally have some sort of linear relation with the distance. Okay, with certain slope. Okay, and they have the electric field is already a linear function of distance. This potential will become some sort of quadratic. Okay, the potential profile of this one will become quadratic and reaches the 0. Okay, so it is something like 0 is the potential that I have here. Okay, when I attach a battery, I'm talking in reference to my VGS. Clear? So the potential difference when I see, which I take it as VG, this entire VG would appear something like this. Okay, I'm just more concerned about this particular profile, which I have it across my, and obviously this potential profile should go to 0 when I reach the end of my depletion layer. Okay, after then there is no potential drop because it's a pure conductor kind of thing that we can assume. Okay, so as we had it here. Why? Because again the electric field in this semiconductor is also equal to 0, and due to which the voltage across this end supposed to be same as that of this end. Okay, and since because we have connected a negative potential or a ground, the same potential has to be reflected here. Okay, so that's the reason why we have drawn something like this. Okay, I guess it sounds interesting. The only thing is I'm not proving anything here because I know the math is a bit complicated, and it really not necessary for us to carry this mathematics to our discussion. Okay, when we talk about CVCARA, that's the reason why I'm skipping many of the things. Okay, so when I have a constant electric field, we have a linear relation with respect to potential. When I have a linear relation in the electric field, it creates a quadratic difference in the potential profile. And it is because of this quadratic potential difference, we will have something in our CV Kara. Okay, so in order to talk about that CV Kara, I'm building all these basics that is required. Clear? So now let me just quickly talk about something that's supposed to be discussed before I get into CV. Okay, we have something known as flat band voltage. Okay, this is a voltage that exists, the difference in the Fermi level of the metal and the Fermi level of your semiconductor. Okay, so whenever the Fermi levels are not equal, okay, then you will have something known as flat band voltage. And now you might wonder, like, I'm jumping from field theory to what is known as semiconductor physics. Okay, so it's time for us to move from here to here. So let me just quickly just take the same structure, MOS structure. Okay, so this is the energy band diagram of the MOS structure when they are apart from each other. Okay, and here you could be able to see that there is a metal, and the metal has the Fermi level. I guess you are all familiar with the Fermi levels. Okay, it is a level where it says that the concentration of electrons that we have, right? I guess you are all familiar with the Fermi level term. Okay, I will not go much in depth because I still have 5 more minutes to get completed. Okay, so the Fermi level of the metal would be somewhere here, and whereas when it comes to oxide, we don't have any charges that is flowing across them, and we don't have something like Fermi level concept here. But what we have is something known as conduction band and the valence band, and they are being apart from each other by a very large band gap, okay, between them. But when it comes to semiconductor, if at all, if I'm concerned about a semiconductor, again, that will have what is known as a Fermi level, okay? And if the semiconductor is an intrinsic, then we know that the Fermi level will be exactly between the conduction band and the valence band, exactly in the midway. But if at all, if I'm doping with a p-type, what happens is that the Fermi level actually shifts from the mid value towards the valence band, okay? Yeah, so now you could see that the Fermi level of my metal is higher than the Fermi level of my p-type semiconductor, okay? And from the concept that you have learned in your p-n junction, what happens when you try to combine both this p-type and n-type semiconductor? What exactly happens when you try to combine them? When you merge, when you sandwich these two distinct layers?
Ionization.
Ionization, but how does this, yeah. Fermi level rises, yeah. Actually, so before depletion layer that creates, what happens is that the Fermi level try to align each other, okay? But here in this case, I'm not talking about a semiconductor and with one more semiconductor. Here, I'm talking about a metal, oxide, and a semiconductor. So what happens is that when we try to, maybe I have to bring the other, sorry. This is a kind of bit of animation that I try to put it. And if at all, if this note has been shared to you people, you have to open this in Acrobat Reader, the latest version, okay, whatever it is. Only in that you can visually see this particular animation part. Okay? So let me just try to make these 3 different layers apart. Okay, when you try to combine these layers, okay, so let me try to run them. So these are the conduction band and the valence band, which are happening to be like this. And when you try to merge the metal and the oxide along with the semiconductor, there are certain physical things that will happen. Okay, so I'm trying to combine them, and there exists some sort of Fermi level difference between the conduction, so between the metal and the semiconductor. I guess is this screen is clear? Okay, so there exists some sort of Fermi level difference between the metal and the silicon. So now, as we know from the Fermi levels will generally try to align each other, right? So the Fermi level of the semiconductor will try to align with the Fermi level of my metal. Metal cannot change by itself, okay? We have to apply some sort of potential, but the Fermi level inside, oh, sorry. Yeah. But the Fermi level that I have across the semiconductor can modify, okay? So now what happens is that right now, the Fermi level, you could see that the Fermi level of my semiconductor, which is on the right side, tries to get aligned. When it tries to get aligned, what is happening is that it is not only the Fermi level gets shifted, but even my valence band as well as the conduction band also shifts up. Okay, but it is only across the bulk. Okay, it is only across the region away from this interface. But when I look across the interface between the oxide and the semiconductor, the Fermi levels are still sticking. Okay, you can't modify these things. Okay, not the entire thing would then get shifted up. Clear? Now, before I jump onto this, I just have a simple question. Okay, I have this conduction band, and here is my valence band. I have two types of materials. Okay, having the same energy or the band gap. Okay, and let me label this as A and this as B. Okay, and I have a Fermi level, something like this, and the other one has a Fermi level that is a bit closer. Which one has a higher concentration of holes? A or B? How do you represent them? Okay, B. Yeah. So as you could see that the higher concentration of majority carriers can be read by measuring the difference between the Fermi level and the valence band. Okay. In the case of a p-type, I'm talking. Okay. In the case of an n-type, you measure the difference between the Fermi level and the conduction band. But in the case of a p-type, you measure the difference between the valence band and the Fermi level. So whereas in this, the difference is higher, means that I have low concentration of holes than compared to this layer. Okay. So now what is happening is that when I switch here, you could see that the Fermi level and this valence band difference becomes higher than compared to the difference between this point and this point. You don't worry about this curvature that I have for the Fermi level. Okay, forgot, I couldn't be able to remove that in that animation part. But when I see here, the Fermi level difference between this point and this point, which is nothing but my valence band, is higher. So what does it mean is that the concentration of my hole near this oxide and this p-type is reduced. Okay, now in a p-type semiconductor, which is uniformly doped, if I lower this concentration on this particular interface, how I can do that? I have to remove some of the holes away from the interface. So when I remove some of the holes away from the interface, what does it leave for us when I remove something out of this particular already neutrally charged atoms? When I remove a hole, what does it create? Yeah, it leaves a negative ion, right? So under this condition, I have the charge profile, which looks something like this. Okay, it leaves a negative ion, okay, because it has removed some of the holes away from the interface and leaves a negative ion. So I'm just going to use a square to represent ions and circles to represent the free carriers here, okay? So now, because we have removed some of the holes away from this interface because of the reduction in the concentration of holes near the interface between the oxide and the semiconductor, it leaves some sort of immobile negative ions at the interface. These ions has to be equally balanced by some charges on the other side of my oxide layer, which is on the interface between the metal and the oxide. Okay, so if I have 3 negative ions, then they have to be compensated by 3 positive charges. Okay, so now let us talk about what is known as the flat band voltage. Now, the point is that I have to remove these positive charges away from this metal. How I can remove these positive charges? We know that just by applying a negative voltage, what happens is that I can attract the positive charges that exist across this interface between the metal and the oxide, right? So let us apply 3 different voltages. Okay, first one is minus V1. Okay, and the next one is minus V2. And the last voltage that I'm going to apply would be minus VFB. Okay, so these are the 3 negative voltages that I will apply sequentially, one after the other. Okay, and see how does it eats up my positive charges that I had at this particular interface. Okay, I just want to eat up these positive charges, or I have to remove these positive charges away from this particular interface, for which I'm applying a negative potential towards my metal. Clear? And I'm going to take 3 voltages for it to remove all these 3 charges. Okay, one is minus V1, the other one is minus V2, and the third one is the most negative voltage, which is minus VFB. Clear? And see how does this band reacts for each of these things. And before I talk about that, I just want to emphasize on this. It is something like the energy in turn can be returned as something like like potential energy can be written in terms of voltage. So now when I try to apply a negative voltage, what happens is that the energy actually, the energy will rise up as I apply some sort of negative potential. Okay, so this could be just discussed with respect to our p-type semiconductor. As we know that the Fermi level will be closer to the valence band whenever we have a p-type, like a kind of positive holes or something. Okay, and whenever we say that there are more of electrons, then this Fermi level will be closer to the conduction band. So you can just think in that particular aspect, and let me just try to show that what exactly I'm trying to say. So let us try to apply some sort of negative voltage to this. Now the Fermi level actually rises up, okay, and even these conduction band and the valence band of the oxide also gets modified. Okay, so because we have charges here, and across this oxide there is a voltage difference. Okay, and since there is a voltage difference, the energies will actually slightly modify. Okay, so this will go something like a kind of tapered quantity. Okay, which I couldn't able to do it. So when I apply some voltage like minus V1, this is with respect to the oxide I'm talking. Even this conduction band and the valence band will also try to, because there is a potential difference across these oxide, and due to which it gets tapered, something like this. Okay, so what is happening is that it is not only our Fermi level of the metal goes high when I apply the value of V1. Okay, so this is for the case when I apply minus V1. Okay, but also you will be seeing some sort of shift in the conduction band as well as in the valence band. Okay, so and even the there are a lot of things I have to talk before I really discuss about this. Okay, yeah, so we will not worry about this oxide part. Okay, so let us assume that these oxide conduction band and valence band are immaterial for our current discussion, and we'll just concentrate only on this. Okay, because I just want to talk about flat band voltage, wherein all these things would be like a kind of flat bands. Okay, yeah, so now when we apply more of negative voltage than compared to V1, then obviously the energy level of our metal actually shifts high. And what is happening is that the Fermi level of the silicon never wants to align after then, because as I said, this particular node, the p-type semiconductor, this has been attached to some sort of reference voltage, and we are not varying that reference voltage that is being attached. And as I said, the energy is basically Q times that of the voltage that I have, and this voltage that I have across the p-type semiconductor is never modified. So all of this conduction band, valence band, intrinsic Fermi level across the bulk stays the same, including the Fermi level of the silicon. Clear? So, but what I'm trying to do is that I'm just trying to apply some sort of voltage across the metal in reference to our p-type semiconductor. Clear? So we are not actually modifying anything or the Fermi level of my silicon. The only modification that is happening is the Fermi level of our metal. Okay, so yeah, so finally when we apply minus VFP, the bands are getting straightened. Okay, so the bands have actually become straight. Now under this condition, you could see there is no depletion charges on the p-type, nor I don't have any positive charges on the metal side. Clear? So it is this particular voltage at which I don't have any charge carries across both the sides of the oxide, and due to which the electric field across the oxide becomes zero. For a p-type semiconductor, the flat band voltage would be towards the negative voltage. It will be in negative side. If this is an n-type semiconductor, then the flat band voltage would be a positive voltage. Okay, and these flat band voltages will map onto what is known as a CV characteristics in tomorrow's class. Okay, so anyhow, we will not worry much about those band diagrams. And in case if you're looking for how the bands would appear for accumulation as well as depletion and inversion, I can just show as a quick review. But again, there are some modifications I have to do with this this band flow. Okay, so this is for accumulation. When I apply a voltage which is more than the minus VSP or in the negative direction. Okay, so the band is bending upward. Okay, so now in the case of depletion as well as in the case of inversion, the band diagrams are not pretty right, but you can just use it. I'll just redraw this picture again because there are a few things that I have to modify. So you could see that the bands are actually bending towards. Okay, so it is trying to bend and almost touches the intrinsic Fermi level of the semiconductor, actually crosses the Fermi level of our silicon. So which means that at a particular point along this particular depletion region, they actually intersect. The picture that I've drawn here is not true. Okay, so there is some correction or some sort of animation correction I have to do it. So it actually has to bend and flow something like this. Okay, so only that particular part I will just tell you. Okay, so in the case of a depletion, I have this oxide, and then there are Fermi levels. The Fermi level of our silicon will remain same as a kind of straight line. Okay, but the things that are bending is actually our conduction band, sorry, our valence band, as well as the intrinsic Fermi level, and along with it the conduction band. Okay, so what is happening is that you could see that at this particular point the intrinsic Fermi level is exactly equal to the Fermi level of our silicon. Okay, so here in this case like there is no free carriers or something like that. Okay, and the amount of charge that I have, okay, so when the voltage VG that is equal to VTH, we know that it's almost like slightly closer but still lesser than this. We said that it has been filled with some sort of depletion layer. Okay, there is a kind of depletion filled with ions. Okay, so which means that I have to have equal number of height across this Fermi level of my silicon. Okay, so whatever the height that I have here has to be filled with this kind of height. Okay, so this gives us the depletion width, and this is the case when I have VG that is equal to VT. Now what I do is that I'll just get into what is known as inversion. Okay, I'm just going fast just because it is not that important for us to discuss. Okay, so from the exam point of view, but for understanding, you can actually just glance this particular topic. Okay, so in the case of inversion, what is happening is that we are trying to shift the value of this Fermi level. Okay, so the Fermi level of our metal is still going down. Okay, and due to which all of these bands are actually getting bended again. Okay, so this is in this case, and this would be the intrinsic Fermi level, and you could see that the amount of separation and the amount of separation is being satisfied here, but there is an extra amount of charge. Okay, or the height is more than what is required, and this is the one that says that we have inverted the channel. Okay, so here in this case we have N-type material, okay, then compared to the P-type semiconductor. So this is as a kind of very short note. Okay, so the band diagrams would then bend like this, and you have a depletion region. Along with it, there is an extension of this intrinsic Fermi level going beyond this Fermi level of the doped semiconductor. Okay, so with this note, I will just stop here. I think maybe you might not understand what I've discussed till because of this fast movement of discussion. Okay, maybe I'll just give a notes. So I'll just make this animation bit proper, and then I'll just send you this presentation, okay, later.